Welcome to Good News Baptist Church, where we exist to love God by making disciples through Christ-centered worship, community, ministry, and missions. We hope that you will visit our website at www.goodnewssbc.org and our worship services on Sundays at 11 a.m. We hope that you are blessed by God's Word.
Good morning. This is going to be a good one. I'm excited about it. And it's titled this. It's titled A Message of Hope in Our King. It is going to be a message from Psalm 24. This is one that's wonderful because it exalts God. It exalts the Creator for who He is. And it follows one that we all know, I'm sure, Psalm 23. That one's a very wonderful psalm. So the context here is uplifting God. It's a message about God and His character, who He is. And so if you would, please stand. We're going to read the scripture together. So Psalm 24, page 564 in the Pew Bibles, if you wish to follow along. Beginning in verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. For He has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. Who may ascend into the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in His holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to falsehood, and who has not sworn deceitfully, he shall receive a blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is the generation of those who seek Him, who seek your face, even Jacob. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Bow your heads. Dear Father, I pray this morning that I would speak encouragement and a message of hope to these people, that they would hear the Scripture spoken, that they would be drawn unto You. In Your name we pray. Amen. Okay, this is a message of hope. So the first way we can put our hope in God, in our King, our hope is in the one who created all things. Beginning in verse 1, it says, The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell within. This tells us some things about God and His character, who He is. God created the earth and all its inhabitants. It belongs to Him. He's the creator of it. When an artist or a person who creates things makes a painting, they own it. It's theirs until they choose to do so with it. When one creates another thing, they have intrinsic right to that. And so from that, we can look at this and we can say, God created all things. He created the whole world, this big rock floating through space, even the universe He created. There is nothing that you can separate from God's creation. There isn't anything crawling on this earth that isn't God's. Nothing can be attributed directly back to anything other than God as its source of creation. All things belong to Him as creator. Every rock, every leaf, every tree. It says the fullness thereof. Fullness is an interesting way to say the abundance that comes out of the ground. Most of us in America have an abundance in comparison. Most of us have meals every day and a roof. The fullness that comes out of the ground is also God's. The things that come out of creation, things that like medicine and science, those are directly attributed back to God because God created the universe. Because God sits over creation and He says, this is the work of my hand. All things that come out of that are therefore His. The world and those who dwell within. Last time I checked, we all dwell within the earth. Is anybody not? Is anybody flying on their spaceship from the moon? No. Okay, so we all dwell within the earth, right? Therefore, because we dwell within the earth, we are all directly attributed back to God's creation. There are only two things in the universe, only two people that have ever existed that weren't created. That's God and Jesus. And they are intrinsically the same person. Entirely outside of that, we are all attributed to God in creation. Therefore, there's nobody that can say, God is not my God because He didn't create me. That's an important thing to understand, because how many people in the world walk around and say, that's not my God? They say, you can have your Jesus, your Christianity, that's not for me. How crazy is it to say that when God created you? Nobody can actually say, God's not my God, and mean it, because God made every last single one of us. All mankind is made in the image of God and the likeness of their Creator. No living being has ever come from a different source other than God. Nothing that comes out of this planet has ever come from a different source other than the God who created this planet. Nothing that has come about, science, math, nothing that spontaneously grows out of the ground, can be attributed to anything other than the God who created this planet. Verse 2, it says, "For he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers." This is again directly attributing all of creation to God's work. When you build a house, the first thing you do is you lay the foundation. If the first thing you do when you build a house is make the roof, you're going to have a hard time, because you have to put everything underneath it, and it's just difficult. You got to start with the foundation. You have to have a good bedrock to lay on, because if your foundation is faulty or isn't set right or is done poorly or constructed badly, the entire rest of the house is going to crumble and fall. That's the whole basis of the parable of the man who built his house on the rock versus the man who built it on the sand. So when it says he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers, this gives God all the credit for creating and founding the universe in which we live. And it's poetic to say that he founded it upon the seas and upon the rivers, because there's so much more to this planet than oceans and water and rivers, right? I mean, we're not in a river or an ocean right now. We're standing on solid ground, on a good foundation made in this building. When it says he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters, it's metaphorical. It's an image. We always associate water with life. I mean, think of the most uninhabitable place you can on earth right now. I'm going to bet a lot of you thought of the desert, because there's no water there. That's a natural human thing for us to associate water in life. We live in a very, very wet area. There's a big creek right there. Like all this grass and trees and everything that grows that we have to cut every 4 days because it rains so much. We live in a very healthy, very lively area because we have so much water. So when it says that God established creation, he established the earth out of the waters, it's a metaphor, it's an image. It points back and it says that God caused all life to come into existence. It is, again, telling us about the character of God in creation. So this not only establishes the character of God, but also establishes the personhood of God. When you are first in line, or when you are first among creation, that means nobody else came before you in line. This matters because when God says, I am first among all creation, I created all things come out of me, that means that there is nothing that has come before God. The buck stops with God. And everywhere else the buck can move on. Somebody created me, somebody created the person who created me, somebody who created the person who created them. But there's whole scores of genealogists that can study back where we come from and who made us and who. That happens in everything. Building style and structure and architecture, that has developed over years. We don't live in huts of sticks and leaves leaned up against trees anymore because, thankfully, architecture developed over time. We have this wonderful building. I don't even know how they make this. The plaster, I guess, is interesting. Things evolve and develop over time, and they all go back to something. The first homes were not like what we live in today, right? I can be attributed back to my parents, who are attributed back to their parents, who are attributed back to their parents. It goes all the way back to Noah and then to Adam. It stops with God. Nobody can go and study God's genealogy and say, well, God came from Zork, who came from, It stops at God. This tells us something about him as a person, because when you are the first and foremost among all things, that means you are unique. We can all look back and say we came from somebody or something. Not God. God says, I created all things come out of me. That makes him singular and unique among creation, because all creation can be attributed back to him. Now, last time I checked, none of you can speak things into existence. None of you can create things. Now, what I don't mean is that you can't make things with your hands. A lot of people here are very good at that. What I mean is you cannot take nothing and turn it into something. That is a very unique skill set that God has. Before God decided to make creation, there was nothing. The technical term for this is ex nihilo. It's Latin for God created universe out of nothing. I remember when I took 8th grade science, they told us there are 2 laws that you cannot break when it comes to science and the universe. You cannot create new matter, and you cannot destroy matter. You can only change it from matter to energy or into other forms, right? So when you put wood in a fire, you're converting it from matter into energy, right? We warm ourselves up, we create light. We're converting matter into energy. God is the only person in the universe that can say, I can create something out of nothing. He's unique in that way. And that tells us more about him as a person, tells us about his character. And that all comes out of these first 2 verses of this psalm. Because God is supreme and first among all creation, we can put our hope in him. God is so sufficient and so complete in who he is as a person that he is the best place for us to put our hope. The reason people buy new cars, the reason people should buy new cars is because there's less risk in that car failing. Because that car has that least amount of risk of failing, people will buy it and they will trust it to get them around from A to B, and so they can go to their work and see their family and do all the things that people do with their cars. As that car gets older and wears out, they have less hope and trust in it, and so people generally will replace it, hopefully with a newer model that will have less risk of breaking down and stranding them. We naturally want to put our hope and our trust in the things that won't fail us. That's why we want to have nice things. That's why we pay the extra 3 cents a block to build our house on a structure on blocks that are thicker so they will hold up better to storms. That's why we trust in things that we can see how they work, and that's why we trust the roof over our head, because it's a good quality roof. Nobody buys 4-year shingles because that's crazy. We buy nice shingles that will last a long time for our roof. We put our trust in the things that we believe will hold up longest. We put our trust in things that we think will fulfill what they promise for us to do. The reason we do that is because we want that to follow through on what it promises us. So God, therefore, is the greatest thing that we can put our hope and our trust in. Because the buck stops with God, because nobody can say, well, God, you come from such and such. We can always put our hope in him because he is first. He is the greatest. Out of God comes all other things. And because of that, we should put our hope in him. There is no other place or person that would be a safer bet for us to place our hope in life. You can buy the newest, nicest, expensivest, best car in the market, and in 10 years, I'm going to bet that it will have problems. I know, because I drive 26-year-old junk. Nothing in creation is guaranteed to not fail apart from God. Even the mountains are wearing away as it rains. Even dirt washes out. No matter where you build your home, you are at risk of it falling down. If nothing else, in years, the material it's built out of will wear out and crumble. Or there could be an earthquake or a hurricane or any number of natural disasters or floods or things that will ruin it. We cannot place our hope in things inside creation because creation is slowly degrading and being remade in God. Therefore, we have to put our hope in the one who does not fail, the one who does not wear out, the one who does not degrade. Because God is first in creation and does not wear out, we can put our hope in him because he is 100% reliable. God will always, always, always follow through when we put our hope and faith in him. Nobody or nothing else in the universe can follow through on that. So the second way we can put our hope in our King, our hope is in the one who directs our lives. So beginning in verse 3, it says, "Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place?" So the first 2 verses develop who God is and who his character is. These are going to tell us how he can direct our lives and how we can put our hope in that. So when it says, "Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place?" What is the hill? Again, this is poetry, so it's not always literally what it says. We have to use our brains a second here. So the hill of the Lord. Last time I checked, walking uphill can be kind of difficult, kind of arduous. The bigger the hill, the more winded you can get. You'll get all sweaty and nasty. It's difficult. It's hard. Nobody just casually walks up a hill. it's this image, it's this metaphor of a steep climb, of a difficult way, of a not a passive or an easygoing path, but a path in life that requires effort and continual movement upward. And it's not just any old hill, it's the hill of the Lord. This is a metaphor, it's an image of climbing this path and ascending towards God, of moving up towards Him in holiness and righteousness. It says, who shall stand in His holy place? Well, in the Old Testament, you will find many, many, many references to the holy place of the Lord. And a lot of times it's very much up on a hill. Jerusalem was built on a hill. It is considered a holy place in the Old Testament. But more often than not, the holy place referred to points towards heaven. It points towards the new Jerusalem that God is making for us, that Jesus is currently building for us. This holy place on the hill of the Lord, that is heaven. That's where we are striving to get to, right? You know, we all can deal with the issues in our lives as Christians because our hope is not in the creation that will fail, but instead in the King who will not fail, and in the promise that we will get into heaven where there will be no more failure or degradation. Heaven will be perfect. It will be without sin. That's where our hope lies. So who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Only a righteous man. It says, he who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. These tell us what a righteous man is like. Again, it's a metaphor. You know, it's not that whoever is going to climb the hill of the Lord is going to stop, wash his hands, you know, get them real nice and clean and get his cuticles all done up, and then he will go up the hill. That's silly. Instead, what it means is that whoever is pure in deed, you know, we do things with our hands. That's what they're for. God created our hands to work and do things with. It's a metaphor that whoever is pure and whoever has clean hands, whoever is doing good works, whoever is striving to not do evil things, this is the kind of person that will ascend the hill of the Lord. Whoever has a pure heart. Out of our heart comes our motives and our desire to do things. If all you ever have motive or desire to do is evil, you will not climb the hill of the Lord, nor will you rest in the holy place. But instead, if you have clean actions and you do good things with your hands, if you have a clean and pure heart that isn't full of deceit and evil, you can ascend the hill of the Lord. It says, those who do not lift up their soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. We know what swearing deceitfully means. It means to lie, to give false oath, to give poor testimony that is not true. Again, honesty and righteousness in our intentions and in our words, what we say. We should not lie and we should not say false things. But a man who lifts up his soul to what, or does not lift up his soul to what is false. So what does this mean? It is that when we worship something, we are devoting our effort and our time and our thoughts to it. That's an easy way to do a soul check, is to say, what do I spend my time thinking about when I'm not doing anything? When I'm mindlessly sweeping the kitchen floor for the 15th time today because my dog sheds too much, what is on my mind? What am I preoccupied with? What am I doing when I don't have to think about what I'm doing? When we worship something wrong, when we worship something other than the creator of the universe, we are lifting up our soul to the altar of what is false. This is more imagery out of the Old Testament in that this comes from a time when people literally went to a statue and they worshiped there. We don't have statues and shrines now. We have sports and we have cars and we have anything we devote our time to. Sometimes family is an altar. Where we lift our soul up is simply a metaphor to what are you being idolatrous of? You know, only God, only the creator of the universe is worthy of true worship and adoration, and only He is worthy of lifting our soul up to Him. All other things is idolatry and to give to one who does not deserve it. These all determine and they display to us what the righteous man who will climb the hill of the Lord is like. It is all a metaphor for somebody who is perfect in deed and thought and word and is not an idolatrous person. This person is a righteous man. It continues to say, he will receive a blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. By entering into this holy place of God, the righteous man will be blessed by God. But how? It says right here, it says, receive a blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Righteousness is the blessing that this man will receive when he enters into the holy place. Now, how can this be? Because if he has to be righteous in order to enter into this holy place. Well, we know now, because we can look back through the Bible and look through history, we know this righteous man who first ascended the hill, who is first among us, is Jesus Christ. He is the righteous man that was good enough, who was clean in hands and pure in heart, and no false oath was ever uttered from his lips. The righteous man from God receives the blessing and righteousness. It's a thing we can't obtain on our own. So when Jesus was first to climb that hill and enter the holy place, to receive that righteousness, he then imputed that to those who would submit ourselves to him. That is the process of sanctification that we are all going through as believers, is that as we draw closer to the day of the Lord, as we draw closer to God, we are becoming more righteousness, we are becoming more righteous in him. Then it says, such is the generation of those who seek him. Him is God, and such is the generation. Generation here does not literally mean everybody born within 1980 to 2004. It's not a generation in that sense. It's a generation in that we are all people that are striving towards Christ. When it says, such is the generation, all these things that describe the righteous man who will enter the heaven, that is us. That is those of us who are seeking God in our actions and our words and our deeds. We are that generation. Those whom Christ has made righteous shall climb the hill of faith and one day remain in his holy place, a place of perfection. Our righteousness is not based on our works, but on the one who bestowed it upon us, the one who climbed the hill first for us, who blesses us with his own righteousness. So our third hope, our hope is in the one who will not fail. So we've established our hope in the character of the one who is perfect. We've established it in our King. We've established our hope also as the one who directs our lives, who is going to show us how to ascend the hill of the Lord to be with him. And this is the best part. Our hope is in the one who will not fail us. It says, lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. This whole last section, verses 7 through 10, they're all a poem. They're a song of glory being lifted up for God. This is a song that will be sung in the end times as Jesus has entered into heaven. When it says, lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, the ancient doors are the doors of heaven, the doors of this holy place on a hill. The King of glory is the righteous man who has clean hands and a pure heart, who is perfect in character. This is a song of victory as Jesus, after the second coming, when he enters into the holy place on the hill for the final time, where we will all come in behind him and join him in perfect harmony together. Our hope is in Jesus because we know that Jesus will not fail. Jesus is the perfect man. He is the righteous man that has always been sufficient. Jesus and God are one and the same and yet different. Because God is perfect in that he is first among creation, Jesus also therefore is a safe bet because he is first among all creation with God. This image of Jesus triumphantly entering heaven after his glorious work on earth is a safe place for our hope. Imagine how boring every sports game ever would be if you always knew the outcome. We wouldn't watch it because it's just sports. It's just people running around. If you always know who's going to win, what's the point? We know how life ends on earth. As Christians, we know the gospel. We know where sinful people that refuse and reject God will go. We know where people who accept God, we know where they will go. We know that God's going to win. We know that Jesus has been perfect in his life and he has sufficiently atoned for the sins of those who would accept him. We know that he's going to climb the hill of faith. We know that he's going to open up the doors of heaven and walk in. The work of the cross was started in Jesus, and this is the ending of his work where it will be finished at his second coming. We can hedge all of our bets on Jesus because we know. This psalm tells us very plainly, Jesus will enter into heaven. He will be the victor. We know how life ends. In order for us to follow Jesus up the hill of faith, we need to have a right standing with God. If you reject God time and time again, if you decide that you're going to live in your sin and that's not my God, you're foolishly rejecting yourself and condemning yourself because your sin has caused you to go into hell. That's the punishment of sin. That's the bad news of the gospel. The good news is that you'll never be good enough to get into heaven, but Jesus was good enough, and he will put his righteousness on you. He will clean you. He will make you whole in himself so that you may join him in heaven. This is good news because our hope is not in anything you and I can do. If we could lose our salvation, I'm going to take this back. I'm going to rephrase this. If I could lose my salvation, I would have done it already. Ever since I've gotten saved, I've sinned enough that if I could have lost my salvation, God would have said, yep, you're done. Sorry, cut you off. Our hope is not in anything we can do. Our works are as filthy rags that are useless and bound for the trash can. Our hope is not in ourselves. It's not in our words. It's not in our deeds. Our hope is in the God who is perfect in all creation and has offered us free salvation only for accepting him and following him. When Jesus met the disciples, he said, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. He didn't say, hey, you got to clean yourself up. You need to stop cussing. And if you're good enough, then I'll let you come follow me. That's not what Jesus said. If Jesus said that, he would have had no disciples because none of them would have ever been good enough to follow him. Jesus simply said, follow me. And he says that to us. He says, you messed up sinner, you bottom of society, follow me, and I will walk you into heaven. Please bow your heads. Dear Father, I thank you for being here this morning. I thank you for being with us. I pray that you would be working in people's hearts, that you would, if anyone here is not saved, God, I pray that you would save them, that you would convict them, that you would work in them. I pray for those of us that are saved, God, that you would continue to change us and mold us and make us more like you. Thank you for being our hope. Thank you for being entirely sufficient and good enough, for being first in creation, and for not failing us ever in any way. In your name we pray. Amen.